Hello, and welcome to Mayer's Teaching Institute. Today, we will cover up the topic on evolution and all the evidences associated with evolution. This topic is in accordance with the Maharashtra State Board Class 10th syllabi. So, in order to cover up this presentation or video for today, I will be encompassing the following topics. And thus, to start with, we need to understand what evolution is all about. So, evolution is a gradual change that occurs in living organisms over a long duration. It is a slow going process through which development of organisms have been achieved. All stages in the changes occurred in various components ranging from the stars, planets in space to the biosphere present on Earth, and that includes even all of us, animals and plants. So, thus, the formation of new species due to changes in specific characters over several generations of living organisms as a response to natural selection is called as evolution. Though evolution started about 3.5 billion years ago, life had not been existent on Earth at the very beginning. But however, there were only some simple elements in the ocean and some organic and inorganic compounds that may have been present at that time. Eventually, complex compounds like proteins and nucleic acids that formed gave rise to the first primitive type of cells by a complex mixture of different types of organic and inorganic compounds. And thus, eventually, that simple compound or the simple cell that had formed, the first primitive cell, gave rise to more cells with some more changes by taking some of the more chemicals available in its surrounding. And evolution happened. Through this time, some got perished, some survived under the principles of natural selection. So, thus, at present, crores of species of plants and animals with a huge diversity, ranging from its shape and complexity, are present on the earth. The animal diversity ranges from unicellular amoeba and paramecium to man and a giant whale. The plant diversity consists of various species ranging from unicellular chlorella, to the huge banyan tree. The life exists on Earth everywhere, from the equator to the poles. Organisms are present at all places: air, water, land, rock, etc. Humans have shown curiosity about the origin of life, and as a reason of which different theories have come into play. Some of them, like the gradual development of organisms, and the natural selection by Darwin's theory, which he has written in the book Origin of Species. And thus, as the theory of evolution goes, the first living material, the protoplasm, had been formed in the ocean. In due course of time, unicellular organisms were formed. Gradually, changes occurred in the unicellular organism, from which larger and more complex organisms were formed. All these changes were slow and gradual, almost over a period of 300 crore years. Changes in development in the living organisms have been all around and multidimensional, and this has led to evolution of different types of organisms. Hence, the overall process is called as evolution, which is organizational. Progressive development of plants and animals from the ancestors having different structural and functional organizations is called as evolution. So, in order to support the overall concept of evolution, a lot of people have worked in this area and have come up with different evidences to prove. Some of these evidences include the morphological, anatomical, vestigial, paleontological evidences, the connecting links, the embryological evidences, and many others, but we will focus on this as per the syllabi. Connecting links can be more understood once we understand the way animals and plants have been classified over this whole period of time. So, anyways, to start with the first evidence under evolution, the morphological evidence. Various similarities like the structure of the mouth, position of the eye, structure of the nostrils or the nose, the ear pinna, The thickly distributed hair on the body are seen in animals, while characteristics like leaf shape, leaf venation, petioles, flowers, etc., have been seen in plants. This indicates that there are some similarities among these groups of plants and animals. Hence, they must have a common origin and have come from the same ancestor. Next, the anatomical evidences. If we look very carefully at these pictures, it doesn't really seem like there is any similarity between the human hand, the foreleg of an ox, the wing of a bat, and the flipper of a whale. Similarly, once we go deeper into these structures, we understand that there is a similarity in the structure of the bones, the bone joints, in the kind of digits and the orientation of the digits. And these similarities have indicated that we have a common ancestor, but some diversion broke us into different kinds of forms. The next evidence, vestigial organs. As the textbook says, degenerated or underdeveloped useless organs of the organisms are called as vestigial organs. However, I would like to put this definition in a little different way and say that certain organs that were useful to a particular animal or to humans at a particular given time in the history, which today may or may not be useful and sometimes be harmful, would be a vestigial organ. In living organisms, sudden development of new tissues or organs for living in changing environments is not possible. Instead, an existing organ would undergo a gradual change. Mostly a specific structure in the body is useful under certain situation. However, the same structure under different situations may become useful or at times harmful. Such structures begin to degenerate under a situation as per the principle of natural selection. However, this process would take 1,000 of years. The appendix, which is useless to humans today, was once a useful organ, but however, it still continues to remain a useful, fully functional organ in ruminants. Muscles of the ear pinna, tailbone, wisdom tooth, body hair, all of these are a part of the vestigial organ system. Our ancestors coming from monkeys obviously needed a tailbone. They used to stay on the trees. We don't need. Wisdom tooth needed for grinding food. Today we have man-made grinders to do the work. So therefore, certain organs have become not so useful over a period of time. Next, the paleontological evidence. Paleontology is basically the study about the fossils. They are the remnants or the impressions of organisms that have been preserved underground. The study of fossils has been an important aspect and one of the most key evidences of evolution. On the level of these organisms in the way they have been stored underground, we understand which organism came earlier and which organism came much later. Those organisms which are available much lower in the earth were the ones who came in first. Then, as humans were the last, we are much up on the top. Therefore, you would see, according to this diagram, the invertebrates are down, then the amphibians, then the reptilians, and finally the mammals and the aves on top. But how do we know this? How do we know that which age these animals belong to, or to which era, whether was it the Cenozoic, the Mesozoic, or the Paleozoic? For that, we have a technique called as carbon dating. Oh, it's not dating between carbon in its different forms, but carbon dating is basically a common principle of analysis used by chemists and paleontologists. Carbon consumption of animals and plants stops after death, and since then, there is only the decaying process of carbon 14. In case of dead bodies of plants and animals, instead of remaining constant, the ratio between C14 and C12 changes continuously, as carbon 12 is not radioactive. The time passed since the death of a plant and animal can be calculated by measuring the extent of radioactive decay of carbon 14 and the ratio of the carbon 14 to carbon 12 present in their body. This is called as carbon dating. It is used in paleontology and anthropology in studying human fossils and manuscripts. Once the age of fossil fuels have been determined by such a technique, it becomes easier to understand or deduce any kind of information regarding to which era did this animal, plant, or species belong to. So, thus, from this, it seems that vertebrates originated much later after the invertebrates. Coming next to the next evidence, the connecting links. Some plants and animals show morphological characteristics by which they can be related to two different groups, hence, they are called as connecting links. For example, peripatus. Characteristics like segmented body, thick cuticle, and parapodia like organs are present. Similarly, this animal shows tracheal respiration and open circulatory system similar to arthropods. This indicates that peripatus was the connecting link between the Annelida and the Arthropoda phylum. Similarly, the duck-billed platypus lays eggs like reptiles but shows relationships with mammals due to the presence of mammary glands and hair. Lungfish performs respiration with lungs irrespective of being a fish. This is an example that indicates that mammals have evolved from reptiles and amphibians and from fishes, and in turn, amphibians from fishes. Now, when we take into the next account the embryological evidence, a much more modern analysis. When we look at these animals and compare it with man, like fish, the salamander, the tortoise, the chicken, the pig, the cow, the rabbit, and the man, once we have all grown, we all look very different. But this is a comparative analysis between the three trimesters of the formation of the fetuses of the respective organism. In the case of humans, since the whole pregnancy period is 9 months, each trimester is divided into 3 months. And in such other ways, each of the other animals' time period of pregnancy has been divided into 3 trimesters. When we compare these animals in the very first trimester, we show that in their embryonic or fetus stage, they are very similar in the initial stage. And those similarities are gradually decreasing. Similarities in the initial stage indicate common origin for these animals. And this is all about the evidences we have about evolution. Now we have to talk about Darwin's theory. Charles Darwin had collected innumerable specimens of plants and animals, and depending upon the observations of those specimens, he published the theory of natural selection, which preaches that survival of the fittest. For this purpose, Darwin had published a book titled Origin of Species. While explaining the concept, Darwin says that all organisms reproduce prolifically. All organisms compete with each other in a life-threatening manner. And during this competition, only those organisms who sustain and will show modifications essential for it to win in the competition, and thus by natural selection, would be the one fit to survive, while the rest would perish. Sustaining and selected organisms can perform reproduction and thereby be the ones to survive over a longer duration of time. However, this theory of Darwin's was objected in many ways. And that is what was sad. But however, it was an important milestone in the research oriented to evolution. Some of the objections were like natural selection is not the only factor responsible for evolution. Yes, natural selection may not be the only one. There will be a lot of other evidence, possible conclusions that one can draw. But yes, natural selection is an important one. Darwin did not mention any explanation about the usefulness or the useless modifications. Obviously, his concept spoke about how we developed, not about what happened to our vestigial organs. There is no explanation about slow changes and abrupt changes. Sometimes there were certain changes that had to happen very fast, some which had to happen over a very long period of time. He could not explain that. So he could just tell us to which era did they belong, how did they belong, why was it so, why was the extinction evident for certain animals. But why some of them went away fast, some of them went away, took a long time to go away, like humans have been on Earth for a very, very long time. So these are kind of things which were not being able to be answered. Next is the concept of Lamarcism. John Baptist Lamarck proposed that morphological changes occurring in living organisms are responsible for evolution, and the reason behind those morphological changes is activities or laziness of that organism. He called this concept as the principle of use or disuse of organs. He said that if the neck of a giraffe has become too long, it is due to its browsing on leaves of tall plants by extending their necks for several generations. Similarly, shoulders of the ironsmith have become very strong due to the frequent hammering movements. Wings of birds like ostrich and emu have become weak because they were not used. Legs of birds like the swan and duck have become useful for swimming due to living in water, and snakes lost their legs by modifications of their body for burrowing habits. All these were examples of types of acquired characteristics and are transferred from one to another generation. This theory was called as the theory of inheritance of acquired characteristics, called as Lamarckism. Development of organs due to specific activities or their degeneration due to no use at all was widely accepted, but the transfer of those characteristics from one generation to another was rejected because it had been verified that many times that modifications brought in us are not transferred to the next generation, and thereby Lamarck's theory was disapproved. So, coming to the next important part is to understand how human evolution actually occurred. Human evolution is said to have started somewhere after the last dinosaurs had started disappearing, approximately about 7 crore years ago. At that time, the monkey like animals had said to evolve from something which is similar, more or less, to the modern day lemurs. The tails of the monkeys of these animals in Africa started disappearing, and enlargement of their brains started occurring. This was about 4 crore years ago. And the ape like man was finally starting to evolve. These ape like animals started to reach the countries of Southeast and Northeast Asia and finally evolved into the gibbon and orangutan. The remaining ape like monkeys or animals stayed in Africa, and from them, the gorillas and the chimpanzees started to evolve about 2.5 crore years ago. The evolution of some of the 2 crore year old species of apes seems to have occurred in a different way. They had to use their hands more often for eating and for other works. The lumbar spine or the lumbar bones had developed in such a way that they had to start standing in an erect posture so that they could stand in their grasslands and use their hands whenever they wanted for any given purpose. Thus, the first human like man started to have an erect posture about 2 crore years ago. So on this map, you will see some of the green areas that mark where these monkeys had traveled and ape-like man had started developing through evolutionary prospects. And finally, most of the work was happening in Africa, following into Southeast Asian countries. And we will see in some time how did they reach India and China. So the first record of the human-like animals was from the Ramapithecus in East Africa. Afterwards, this ape man grew up in size and became more intelligent, and thus the ape of South Africa had evolved about 40 lakh years ago. The morphology of these human-like animals started to appear to be the member of the genus Homo about 20 lakh years ago, and thus the skilled human was developed. And about 15 lakh years ago, human walking with an erect posture was evolved. It may have existed in China and Indonesia of the Asian continent. Evolution of the upright man continued in the direction of developing its brain, and therefore the evolution had occurred. And this is a time flow in which you can see how from that simple lemur to the modern day Cro-Magnon man about 50,000 years ago, we have evolved. And the brain development, the evolution of this upright man's brain development was in the last 1 lakh years. The brain of the 50,000-year-old man had been significantly evolved to the extent that he could virtually be considered as the class of the Homo sapiens, the wise man. Evolution of the upright man was thus almost coming to an end. Neanderthal man had been considered as the first example of the wise man. The Cro-Magnon man had then evolved about 50,000 years ago, and after that, evolution had been faster than earlier. About 10,000 years ago, the wise man started to practice agriculture. It started to rear the cattle herds and establish cities. Cultural development took place. Art writing was invented about 5,000 years ago, and thus history had been started. Modern science has emerged about 400 years ago. Industrial society was established about 200 years ago. And now we have reached a stage and we are still searching for the roots of human ancestry. So thank you for listening to this video and thank you for sparing your time. I hope you took a good lesson about evolution from this. I hope you like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Thank you.